Hello again and welcome. My name is Doug Davidoff. I am the founder and CEO at Imagine Business Development. And I just want to start off by telling you how excited I am for what we're about to share. We literally were adjusting the slides and working on things up to just about 2 hours ago. So wherever you find yourself in this apparent spring that doesn't want to start, I appreciate you taking some time out of your day to hear what we have to say. Now, of course, we gave you guys a pretty enlightening or pretty exciting topic, if you will, how to double your pipeline in 90 days. So we figured if that wasn't enough to get you to take some time out of your day, we didn't know what would. I am going to go ahead and jump right in. I'm going to do a little housekeeping first. We're going to jump in because I think I'm challenging even myself for the amount of content we're going to be communicating to you in the next approximately 55 minutes. If you have any questions, please feel free to use the question and answer panel. I will be paying some attention to that as we go through the session. It is the goal at the end of the program to leave some room for conversation if you want to ask anything about the program or anything else. And then we also have a chat pane. So if you have any questions or comments, you can go ahead and leave something there and we'll try to address that if it comes in as we go through the program. Like I said, we've got a pretty tight line here in terms, we're going to try to communicate a whole lot of stuff to you in a relatively short period of time. So we're going to save the question and answer period for the end and work through the program. So that's it. Let's get started. Let's talk about how to double your pipeline in the next 90 days. All right, we just need the mouse to work to move things forward. The program I'm about to share with you is really going to be broken down into two parts. Part one, we're going to be focusing in on some of the results of some research that we've completed about 30 days ago is really when we completed this and started putting it, full scale into practice. It's been work that we've been doing over the last 18 to 24 months to really look at what are the key barriers, what are the key issues that are changing that companies have to address to be able to accelerate their customer acquisition process. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to share with you the key findings from that. We're going to identify the problem and, more importantly, the cause that's dragging customer acquisition results almost across the board. There are certainly some companies that are not seeing that drag, and what you're going to find is, for the most part, they're all implementing some form of what I'm going to be talking about with you today. Then part two is going to get into what you're all probably here for, the specifics of laying out that strategy and providing some of the key tactics to be able to double the pipeline, potentially more. And really what our goal here is, even more than doubling the pipeline, is we want to put you, whether you're a senior executive, a funder, a marketer, or a salesperson, we want to put you in a position where you can put your investments to work, you can implement your strategies and tactics, get that explosive growth, but then really take advantage of what Jim Collins in the book Good to Great calls the flywheel. Get that momentum going so that you're able to maintain very high velocity growth almost effortlessly. Now, we're going to be covering some real new material today, so I got to give you a couple of disclaimers. First one, we're going to get a bit technical for a short period of time. So we're going to get a little bit into theory, a little bit into some of the things that we don't always pay attention to in terms of what's happening behind the scenes. So bear with me on that. It's important we understand that. We're also going to get into a little bit of math and science or physics in terms of what we're talking about. But I promise you, as someone who dropped biology and failed chemistry in college, stay with me. You'll be able to get through it. I'm going to be sharing some truths. You're welcome to agree or disagree with what I share with. And I want to let you know that what I share with you today is not necessarily going to make you happy right away. This is not a program about a quick hit. Here's, change your outbound script to this or do that, and magically people are going to come into the pipeline. But I promise you, if you follow what I share with you today, you will love me and you will love what we share today in a year or less. So I'll give you the precursor. If you're looking for quick hits, if you're looking for that tactic or that magic phrase, feel free to jump off this right now because you're not going to get that. What we're going to be doing is talking to you about how to structurally drive 2x to 5x pipeline velocity and really open up that opportunity for growth and to make growth less heavy, if you will. Now, to understand what we're going to talk about today, I also want to share with you some key principles. If you disagree with these principles, then you're probably going to disagree with a lot of what we share with you today. The first principle, and I think this is something that salespeople and selling organizations all too often forget, is that buyers buy on their time. And frankly, they buy on their terms. They buy on their time, not yours. Good salespeople, good marketers, we can influence that, but we can't structurally change that. And a lot of what is happening right now is as organizations are getting overly aggressive is we're fighting the buyer time zone, if you will. We're back to getting out of sync with buyers, and that is chasing them from us. This is why buyers are putting up bigger obstacles and pushing against us, not because they don't want to talk with salespeople, not because they don't value salespeople. It's because salespeople continually try to force buyers to work on the salesperson's terms and the salesperson's timeline than the other way around. Goldilocks had it figured out. Not too soft, not too hard, just right. With sales, if you push them too early, you might get them into a sales cycle, but it's going to take a lot more time, a lot more energy, and your probability of winning the sale is going to go down. If you wait too long, you're going to miss opportunities. You're going to be put into much harder negotiation periods. You're going to be commoditized. You do not want to be in the sales process too early or too late. Take the Goldilocks approach and get there just right. That's what we're going to be talking about today. Another principle I think you would agree with, when you're on the buy side, you don't want to be sold to. People don't want to be sold to. But what we also have to understand is that people, and this is true of buyers, people want to eliminate their problems and they want to capture their opportunities. That's their goal. Their goal is not to buy anything. Their goal is to eliminate problems, capture opportunities, achieve results, live a happier life. And they're going to follow the perceived path of least resistance. And so understand that, because the sellers that align with these facts, the sellers that make their process the path of least resistance, they win sales faster and gain an unfair competitive advantage. And here's what an unfair competitive advantage is. Your competition looks at what you're doing and they say, well, they're not doing anything special. They're not doing anything different. We're doing basically the same thing, except you're blowing their results away. That's what I want to talk about today. Gaining that unfair competitive advantage. Now, to understand what you have to do today to gain that unfair advantage, let's take a step back in time. Let's do a quick walk through history in sales. We can go back to the 1970s, and really it was the 60s and 70s that selling and marketing and advertising got professionalized. It's when it became more than just the peddler, more than just the salesperson on the road, and we started hiring professional people to sell and to market. And really the 1970s, they were the day of Don Draper. Charisma and power and big flash, et cetera. That's what selling and marketing was about. Over the next 20 years, we moved to the Glenn Gary, Glenn Ross days. The ABCs of selling, always be closing. The manufactured ideas of formulas, attention, interest, decision, action. This idea of optimize and efficient and push it through. Because up to about 1995, that's when the fulcrum began to shift. The seller had the advantage over the buyer. Buyers needed sellers more than sellers needed buyers. Then the 20 years from 1995 to 2015 ushered in the zero moment of truth. The whole idea that buyers now had access to the same information, sometimes even more information than the seller had access to. the independent journey and the parallel journeys that buyers took, where they were no longer reliant on salespeople to tell them what they could do, what they couldn't do, what was available, what the competition did, or how much things cost. And so when we look at the world of selling over this last 20 years and look at the world of demand generation and marketing as well, we're going to see an interesting transformation. We're going to see progress that has occurred. I started doing this stuff about 15 years ago. And 15 years ago, I talked to companies. This was the dominant thing that I talked to companies about. I said the problem was they were building flat funnels. We were doing a whole lot of things to create some level of awareness, but we had built no funnel. Literally, from awareness, the only thing that made any sense to continue any type of relationship, engagement, conversation, whatever, was to move into a sales process. Hey, nice to meet you. Want to buy from me? And so we had these huge flat funnels. Money invested in marketing wasn't producing revenue in the level that the investments were worth. And the reason was we'd get the attention, but we had no means to retain it. And about 11 years ago, a small company in Boston dubbed the idea of putting things out there to become more attractive, dubbed it inbound marketing. And HubSpot ushered in a wave of inbound marketing. Companies started looking at lead generation totally differently. Aaron Ross came out with the book Predictable Revenue, and suddenly the entire way we started looking at how to enter markets and grow fundamentally changed. And we realized we couldn't survive with flat funnels. And I realized as I was putting this program together that it's rare now in the last 2 years that I talk about a flat funnel as being the key problem. And the reason is that it's now commonplace to accept the need for lead generation. Top of funnel's no longer a new word. Right? We talk about content. We talk about lead generation. It's no longer the exception of someone who does a white paper, a checklist, a blog, a landing page, or whatever. Hell, if you go online and you stay into where all the insiders are talking, the argument is, do forms still work? We're past the days of saying you need to have form. Now the argument is, have we gone past that day? And companies have developed tops of funnel. Companies are sitting on more and more leads. And I would say, as a general rule, generating leads is not the problem. As a matter of fact, more and more companies that I talk to, certainly the ones that are serious about pursuing aggressive growth, they tell me they've got too many leads, but it's still not translating to predictable revenue. It's still not translating to faster growth at lower costs. We're hiring salespeople. Companies, high velocity companies, are hiring salespeople at a faster rate than their growth rate. You see, here's what funnels look like today. Right. We've got this top of funnel, but it hasn't connected to the bottom. There's this gap, and the bottom of our funnel hasn't changed materially. I mean, sure, there have been some improvements, and there are certainly some companies that are knocking the cover off the ball. They're changing the game that's being played. But by and large, most selling organizations are dealing with the same problems they dealt with 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. They're just dealing with it at a much higher velocity, at much higher stakes, with much tougher competition. 10 years ago, we started talking to the market about the idea that marketing and sales both mattered, but there was a chasm that existed. While we've spent more time paying attention to demand generation, inbound marketing, content, sales enablement, sales acceleration, buyer enablement, whatever buzzword you want to fill in here, while we've done that, that chasm still exists. And what's worse is, all too often we're spending more money and we're in more hyped up conversation, more hyped up circumstances. We're having to run even faster and faster than we had to run before. How did we get here? What's all this mean today? Well, let's take a look at how companies sell. We're talking about doubling the pipeline. So let's look at what just about every company's pipeline process, sales process looks like. And there are different words and different terms and a different number of stages. I'm looking to normalize this. Basically, everybody has 4 stages to the process. There's basically 4 key parts. There's prospecting, there's a qualification process, presentation, demos, close, overcome objections, whatever you want to say. That's basically the sales process. And what's funny is it's the sales process today. It was the sales process 20 years ago. It was the sales process 35 years ago when I went to Tom Hopkins boot camp in Tampa Bay, Florida. It really hasn't fundamentally changed. So for all this noise about, everything's changed, it's kind of funny that while we have fancier terms, we're still basically doing the same things. But the buyers changed. That whole 0 moment of truth thing has happened. And buyers are taking on more and more of the journey on their own. Now, we can argue whether they're willing to talk to salespeople or not willing to talk to salespeople. The point of the matter is, whether I'm talking to a salesperson or not, I'm also conducting a parallel journey. And I'll share with you, one of the things that we're finding that's interesting is it is getting harder and harder to enter in the sales cycle in this phase. But it's not that much harder to enter, say, pre-10% phase or post-80% phase. You see, when I first got into selling, it was right about that 30 to 50% mark. That was the sweet spot. That's when I wanted to begin a conversation. They were serious in consideration. They were still learning. They had good questions. They wanted to know what we could do. They wanted to know what the risks and options were. Oh, that was such a great time to get into conversation. And this is the hardest place to get into now. And here's the thing that's really interesting. It's in right about that 33 to 55% range, right in that zone. That's where the decision criteria is set. That's where value is placed. That's where thoughts are made. That's really where the decision and the advantages get set. This is the most important point of influence. By the time you get to the end of the sale, you're rearranging chairs, you're putting better ornaments on things, but you're not fundamentally changing the viewpoint. And you see, the other thing that's happened is that selling organizations and growth organizations have become obsessed with the sales cycle. Shorten the sales cycle, how many touch points to the sales cycle? And it's funny because for the last decade, selling organizations have obsessed about the sales cycle. And the sales cycle has gotten consistently longer and taken consistently more touch points to be successful. So for all that attention that's being paid to the sales cycle, it's really not producing anything the other end. And the reason for that is the sales cycle is only the last part of it. You see, the sales cycle is when we get involved. It's the buying cycle that matters. We've got to orient ourselves to the buying cycle, of which the sales cycle is a piece. But just as the proverbial iceberg, 80% or more is below the waterline. 80% or more happens outside of our direct observation. And if we don't orient to that, if we don't change the waterline, if you will, then we're going to continue to get pushed later and later into the process, and we're going to get more and more commoditized. And the challenges that we talk about today are only going to get bigger. Because if there are any veterans on this call, I hate to say it, I feel like I'm the old guy now. I got into professional selling 30 years ago. I find it hard to believe that I'm 30 years old. I struggle with that, let alone I've been in my profession for 30 years. And 30 years ago, I came in with a goal to change how people sold and marketed, because sales and marketing was broken. Sales and marketing was screwed up. And today, we're saying the same things that we said 30 years ago, and I'm pretty sure we said it 20 years before that. The problem is we're spending more money. The problem is we're working harder. The problem is we need to be on more. And yeah, we've started paying attention to the funnel. But this is what's happened. We don't have flat funnels anymore. We have bulging funnels. It is not at all unusual that I meet somebody, that I talk to a company, I look at a situation, and what we see is they actually have more leads at the bottom of the top of the funnel. That's the bottom of the top of the funnel. Than they actually have leads coming in. So the funnel's not actually narrowing at the beginning, it's widening with different levels of engagement, opening emails from time to time, visiting websites from time to time, attending webinars from time to time, downloading white papers from time to time, but not actually doing anything. Yeah, we've hired sales development reps to pound the phones and schedule 15-minute AWOFs and try to move them through there. And yeah, if we increase the call volume and we drive that through, yeah, we'll pull some people through the funnel. We'll pull people down. But we're sucking them into the funnel, and our sales needs are so big that we don't have any time to build it, that it's just a mass play of, let me grab what I can from the top and push it through to the sales executive to drive it, to have any chance of success. It reminds me of what about 5 years ago at my house, we had this huge problem because, I have a nice basement and we have a stairway on the outside going down to the basement, but the builder built it with just this small drain, and that's all that was there. And we had the roof of our dining room came, and the roof of our living room came in. And so when it rained even a little bit hard, that place flooded like Noah's Ark. One time I went back there to try to address something, and literally the water line was 3 feet high because there was so much stuff coming in that the bottleneck of that drain just couldn't handle it, and everything got backed up. And that's what sales is like in so many places today. Databases are bigger than they've ever been before. And what are we doing? We're just throwing more and more and more stuff in there, and we're hiring more people, and we're offering discounts, and we're doing all these things because we've got this bulging pipeline. So this bulging funnel that's still not translating to higher velocity sales relative to the number of people we have in place. Right. Are your salespeople producing 50% of the economic value that they produced 3 years ago? What are you doing today to make sure that 2 salespeople in 2 to 3 years can produce the economic value that 3 salespeople produce today? And my bet is it's the reverse that's happening. But let's take a look at a company that did it differently a long time ago. A company that I've developed, quite a relationship with. And if you know me today, you know me as someone who is a huge fan of HubSpot. We're a platinum partner. We do a lot of work with them. They're core to our tech stack. But when HubSpot first started talking to me, it wasn't so. They talked to me for 2.5 years before I even engaged in a kind of sort of serious conversation. The first sets were all about, yeah, I'm not interested. No, hey, nice blog, like the information, not interested. I'm not going to build it. I'm not going to build something on your thing. I've got to own this, that. I could go on and on as to why I wasn't open to the whole HubSpot thing. But here's the thing that HubSpot did that was brilliant. They didn't sell me. They continually worked to engage me in conversation, to get me thinking, to be valuable. And then something happened on my end where I realized situations were changing. I needed to do things a little bit differently. I realized in hindsight, they had begun to influence how I looked at things. And then I said, hey, you know what? Let's take a look at that. You know what? I have some concerns, but let's take a look at that. And in a very short period of time from there, I was a customer. And since that time, and I've been a customer now for 8 years, customer and a partner, and I am directly responsible for more than $1.5 million of ARR for them. Right? I have produced a tremendous amount of revenue for them by spreading the word, what I pay them, other people that I've influenced. Right? Had HubSpot not done what they did, if HubSpot had tried to suck me through and push me to the demo and sold me, I would have pushed them away. I would have never been there. I would be on some other platform doing something else. Right? So this is not a story about HubSpot. This is a story about the keys to hyper growth. Right? And here's, I love being able to see other places where principles take place. Because what I've learned is when something is true, it's not just true in a situation. It's true everywhere, right? It shows itself in a number of different places and a number of situations. And so let's look to science. Let's look to physics. Remember, I warned you. Let's look to science and physics to see what is the secret of high velocity growth. And if anyone's ever flown a plane or flown on a plane, you've been exposed to the physics of growth. It's a principle called lift. And what lift means is, what creates lift is if the velocity of wind above the wing is greater than the velocity of wind below the wing, it creates a vacuum, low pressure above, high pressure below, and it literally lifts the plane up. That's why wings are curved, in case anyone was wondering, to force the air velocity above the wing to go at a faster rate than the air velocity below the wing. That creates lift. That creates effortless growth. This isn't something that some inbound marketing guy came up with. This is science. This is physics. This is how planes fly. This is how we get growth. So we've come to look at every idea, every tactic, every action that is taken as, is this an above the wing action or a below the wing action? And if you want lift, you've got to aim more of your resources. You have to have higher velocity above the wing than you have below the wing. Now, by the way, manufacturers have known this for years, because if you want to produce higher levels of production, you have to grow production capacity at a faster rate than production. What you're doing above the wing is production capacity. What you're doing below the wing is production. Okay, Doug, this sounds great. Wonderful theory. What does production, what does the wing mean to me? Because I'm not flying a plane. I'm trying to grow a business. Here's what the wing means. Where is buying intent established? Not who I'm going to buy from, but there's a point in a buyer's journey, in that progression, where the buyer begins to act with intent to do something. Now, by the way, up to that point, there's mild intent at best, and oftentimes there's no intent. Hey, I'm researching a problem. I'm trying to understand something. You know, when you're in the awareness phase, intent is very low, because I'm not looking to learn about a solution. I'm looking to understand a problem. And let's not forget, at best, 15% of your market is even in a funnel. Most of them are above it. They're not aware or considering. They're not even thinking about it. They're thinking of other things. That point in the process where the buyer goes, hey, you know what? I think we're going to do something about this. We're intent on doing something or deciding not to do something about this. That's the point of the wing. And if the velocity of your actions and your conversations and your engagement above that point are lower than below that point, then every time you grow, every new customer you bring in, you're actually creating a gravitational pull against growth. You're forcing costs to go higher, because the more that there's a downward pressure, the harder it is to bring people in. And that's why you've got so many salespeople that are just getting absolutely burnt out, right? Because we're killing our production capacity. We're killing our addressable market. We're so focused on hitting this quarter's number or this month's number that we've got salespeople working till 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night, waiting for word on a deal to come through or not. It's just not sustainable. And what we're seeing is costs are going up. Even those companies that saw lower costs because they've kind of fallen on this old bandwagon to, you know, they saw pop up in growth and they wanted to accelerate those growth numbers, have begun to see, I call it the giant sucking sound. If you remember Ross Perot, I pull it from that. This is the giant sucking sound. So let's apply that to our world. Let's apply it to the funnel, right? The whole idea of we want to attract people, the top of the funnel, convert is the middle of the funnel, close is the bottom of the funnel, delight is customer success. It's at that lower third of convert. That's where buying intent is typically established. So if you were to normalize your funnel, normalize your stages to put buying intent at about a third from the bottom of that middle of the funnel, that's the wing for you. You want to increase your your production capacity, you want to build lift, you want to make growth effortless, make sure you're getting greater velocity and traction above that point than you are below that point. Now, by the way, it's a race, because if you do a good job above it, the velocity below it is going to increase for you. So you have to continue to do an even better job of it. And that's what creates lift. And that's the area that we're missing. You see, I've looked at hundreds of pipelines. I've looked at hundreds of sales processes. I've looked at hundreds, thousands of CRM. And I've noticed something. There's a stage missing in most pipelines. And I'm going to use my terminology. You can call this whatever you want to call it, but I call that stage discovery. It's the stage where buyer and seller meet, align, and sync. The zero moment of truth hasn't just changed the fact that buyers now have access to information that they used to not have access to. It's changed because now when buyer and seller first meet, they are not in sync. Pre-zero moment of truth, buyer and seller met. That was the beginning of the buying journey and the beginning of the selling journey. That's not true anymore. Now, I'm talking about aligning and syncing. I'm talking about buyer and seller, and certainly a lot of what I'm talking about relates to complex B2B sales where we have salespeople in place. But we work with companies that offer SaaS products, pretty low ACV SaaS products, and salespeople only touch about 20% of the transactions. You'll see the same thing happen. So I'm going to talk about conversation and engagement and talking and things like that. Sometimes that's a physical offline conversation, but it can happen online just as much. It can happen automatically. It can happen with bots. It can happen with good content, right? But what's happening is we're missing this whole stage of discovery, and we're kind of delegating it or relegating it to marketing or brand or awareness. But we're not doing anything with it. And that's why we've got these bulging funnels. Discovery is designed to cross the let's talk hurdle. The let's talk hurdle is distinctly different from the buy from me hurdle. But we're so massively focused on trying to drive a number, enhance our sales, whatever the case may be, that we're look at the messaging on your website, look at the content that you put out there, and I will bet you that at least 50%, if not 80 or 90% of it is about why I should buy from you, not why we should talk, not why you should think about this more, not why you should engage in it. We've got to get back to crossing the let's talk hurdle, let's engage hurdle, before we start addressing the buy from me hurdle. We pay so much attention to efficiency that massive attention from forward-thinking companies on sales cycle times, time in each stage. What can we do to shorten the time in each stage? I know somebody who runs a sales development program, and it's a very good one, right? And one, they're seeing some numbers deteriorate, but one of the key measurements is like 80% of sales qualified leads need to happen within 30 days for them to be able to hit their numbers. And what I mean by that is from first contact, from first attempt to SQL or not, it has to happen in 30 days. You've got to be in the first stage of that pipeline in 30 days, or you're not going to be able to hit the number. And then we got to get you through that first stage, that diagnosis, needs assessment, whatever you want to call it. Hell, I see more and more people skip the whole needs assessment. They go right to the demo. Hey, let's talk about the solution. Let's talk about how this can, they do 5 minutes of, well, help me understand your company. Here, let me tell you what we can do. And then they wonder why customers push back. So we've got to add this discovery stage. That has to become part of the sales process. And yes, it's still marketing. Marketing is involved. Marketing is involved through everything now. But sales needs to be involved. We have to take sales responsibility, whether that's sales people, sales assets, whatever it may be. We have to have this defined stage of discovery. Now, here's why nobody wants defined stages of discovery. You can get me engaged. Think about my HubSpot story. When they first started talking to me, there was zero predictability. None. I'm going to act on my terms. But because they established a means of conversation, they influenced me. Right? But if some data guy, and I'm a data guy, But if some data guy or some sales ops guy was looking at numbers and saying, hey, our discovery stage is getting too long, we've seen that if we implement 18/7 cadence, we can shorten the time in discovery, and that'll create more deal opportunities into the pipeline because we'll have more demos, blah, blah, blah. Of course, what they don't notice is 80% of that engagement disappears because they didn't want to go to demo. And oh, by the way, they didn't see that, oh, yeah, they pushed more sales through, but their win rates were going down. Or to keep them where they were going up, they were offering more and more discounts, and then churn was happening on the back end, and all these other things were going on because we were solving for the wrong thing. Right. And so this is why we don't pay attention to it, because it messes up our numbers because it's not predictable. But this is where the pipeline gets doubled. This is where all of the resources are. This is where all of the value, this is where the demand is. And we need to engage with it, and we need to align with it, or we're going to be at bigger and bigger disadvantages. Alrighty, let's talk about how do we do it. Let's talk about how do we double the pipeline? How do we make explosive growth effortless? Before I do that, let me share with you a couple of dangers in this strategy. One advantage of not paying attention to discovery and kind of the demo and go philosophy is you're not going to waste a lot of time. I mean, yeah, you'll waste time on people that you shouldn't be talking to, but it's a very high velocity process. There's not going to be a whole lot of work. I still remember the best customer I've ever gotten. Took me 2 years of work before I had my first conversation. And again, think about HubSpot's work with me. It took them 2.5 years before I actually engaged in conversation. Now, I'll point out later, it took them 2.5 years of calendar time. It didn't take them a lot of sales time. I didn't occupy a lot of capacity because of how they manage the process. So you got to be careful, because if you don't have the process in place, you will waste time, and time is the scarcest resource. Second thing is your metrics and rewards have to align to the strategy, or you'll end up getting the worst of both worlds. Kind of what I just talked about in my mocking of the discovery phase with a sales ops person. Third point, you may have to look at your sales process differently. You may have to reallocate the resources where you put your resources in the sales process. Selling might not be exactly like it used to be. And the last thing is you got to bring something to the table. If the only thing you're able to do is tell me about your product and walk me through a brochure or a demo that I would have preferred to just watch the video on my own, then this isn't going to work. Right? You got to be able to bring something to the table. You have to have a conversation. You have to have a point of view. You have to really create some value. Now, I want to hit one other point before I get into the solution again, and that's I want to talk a minute about metrics, because we are measuring the wrong things. These are the things that we measure all the time. This dominates the dashboards of sales organizations and marketing organizations. Marketing organizations are sales organizations. We got to stop calling them different things. We look at clicks and response rates, meetings set, meetings held, sales cycle time at each stage, closing rates. I mean, think about this for a second. I bet you this dominates your dashboard. And I probably lost you now. Huh? Yeah, this is the important stuff, Doug. This is what tells me if I'm on track or not. No, it's not. Frankly, these are all rear view indicators. And what's worse, at best, they correlate with success. Manufacturing used to be just like this. They used to look at things like this, and it's why manufacturing for years, the more money that was spent, the worse the results were. It's why finally there was a revolution in manufacturing around total quality management, just-in-time inventory, and things like that. You see, here's what we need to be measuring. How much time do we spend on an opportunity? Not calendar time, but how much time is spent. How can we find ways to allow customers to behave and prospects to behave the way they truly want to behave, right? Which could also lessen the time that gets spent. We should be looking at turns. How many sales opportunities can a sales team handle over the course of a year? See, this was the genius of Southwest. Southwest figured out how to get 2 more segments a day per plane than their competition. That's how they were able to offer lower fares and make more money. We need to be measuring capacity, yield, velocity, and throughput. We're trying to figure out how much lifetime value can we put through our revenue manufacturing process, our customer manufacturing process within the constraints that we have? That's what we're solving for. Right. And only when we look at it in that holistic pattern can we really create a sustainable advantage. And this might sound really advanced. It's not. It's just a different mindset. It just requires that you look at things differently. But once you look at them differently, it actually gets really simple, really fast. One thing to keep in mind for all that I just said, this is not an all or nothing strategy. You can take what I'm about to share with you and apply it to what you're doing without fundamentally changing what you're doing. But I do want to caution you, be purposeful in what you do. Don't just say, hey, yeah, I heard this great strategy. It's working. Hey, we're going to do this and we're going to double our pipeline. Because I promise you, I could have done a webinar on here in half the time, would have been easy, would have taken no time from me on how to double your pipeline. Let me tell you, getting opportunities into the pipeline, that's easy. Getting them to produce real revenue and sustain, that's hard. Right? And so I don't want to just put more deals into your pipeline. I want to put more revenue in your pocket. So be purposeful in what you do and make sure you manage your expectations to what you're doing. Alrighty, here are the core requirements. Have a deep understanding of your ideal client profile and your key personas. You got to know them better than they know themselves before you get started. Have a deep understanding of their journey. Have very strong funnel and lead management processes and protocols. Yes, I have a lot of friends from Canada. Develop a sufficient number of offers to support what I call the hook play. This is the thing that gets people into your pipeline. This is the key to doubling the pipeline. And then have the right dashboards to monitor progress and adjust accordingly. Know your market. I'm not going to spend any more time here. I've got hours of webinars and videos and reams of white papers, ebooks, workbooks, and blog posts on ideal client profile and buyer personas. So if you want anything on that to understand what I mean by that, just send us an email, visit the website. Watch this online in a couple of weeks. We'll probably have links on the slide for you to be able to go find it. Right. So I'm not going to spend any more time there. I had a podcast yesterday. We interviewed Matt Hines, just brilliant marketer, understands sales as well as any marketer that I've ever met. And one of the things we talked about is, if you don't understand really the journey that your customer is going through, then all this stuff about attribution and predictability, it's all a big giant joke. Right? You got to know the journey. But here's the thing. This is not the journey. This is a nice little structure for marketers and even for some salespeople to be able to use. It breaks things up into kind of big blocks, archetypes, but it is not a planning tool. This is not understanding your buyer's journey. This is understanding your buyer's journey. What are they doing? What are they thinking about? What's their mindset before they even have an inkling of thinking about something that can relate to you? What's the stimulus? What's the process? Where and how do they go? This is how you create predictability, because when you understand the map that they go through, when you map their process out, now you point them in the right direction. You align your actions. This is how you create efficiency. This is how you really shorten the cycle, right? But if you don't have this, you're not going to be able to get it done, right? Because it's just too unpredictable. It's too big. It's too vague. And when it's vague, then all you can do is talk about your product, your solution, your service. And when that happens, you're going to get commoditized. Have a clearly defined funnel. Now, here's the thing that's tough about sales and marketing. The tough thing about sales and marketing is it's never the exact same thing twice in a row. The situation is always different. And so we talk about process, and I talk about manufacturing process. And the thing that's nice about a manufacturing process is that a manufacturing process is a closed system. It's a closed process. Sales and marketing is an open process. The customer gets a vote. The customer has a role in that. And so your process has to be built to adjust to real life situations. But remember earlier I said when something's true, it's true in multiple places. So let's go to my favorite example of repeatable, sustainable process in a dynamic open loop system. It's baseball. Every swing is going to be a little bit different because every pitch is a little bit different and the player is different. How tired are they? Where are they hurt? Did they just, hit a ball off their knee? And what's more, the pitcher is not throwing the ball for you to hit it. The pitcher is throwing the ball trying to fool you. You have to be able to adjust to that. But if you study baseball and you study hitting, you're going to see there's a swing path. There's a predictable, repeatable process. Now, you can have the right swing and fail, and you can have the wrong swing and succeed. But what you're doing by mastering the swing is putting probability and luck in your favor. Right? Luck is always an ingredient. The question is, how do we harness it? And we harness it by having strong, repeatable process and protocols. Stop calling prospecting. Break it down. What are we trying to do? What's our swing path? This is the swing path we see happening 95% of the time or more. Job 1, create awareness. That's my first goal. Have I created awareness? Now, I want to create awareness that leads to engagement, so I'm not going to do something that just creates awareness for the sake of that. But job 1 is create awareness. Job 2, engagement. Hey. Now, as we talked about earlier with these bulging funnels, we've had plenty of engagement. There are plenty of people who have touched what's going on. But we keep waiting for them to want to buy from us. Or we keep just trying to sell to them and then we go, inbound marketing doesn't work. Content marketing doesn't work. Forms don't work. Right? No, we don't work. Now, my next goal is I want to get a dialogue. Then I want to move to a deepening conversation, and that leads to the commitment to investigate, consider, move forward. Now, remember, in a big ticket, high value sale, like what we do on a day-to-day basis, we have people driving this. But think about how you engage with Amazon, with Apple, with any number of things. We're in the process of upgrading our project management systems. And this is exactly the process that we're going through. A lot of general review, beginning to get a little bit of engagement. We frankly don't even want to talk to a salesperson right now. And so the people that are beginning to win us are the ones who have built their assets in alignment with this, realizing that marketing is not just about marketing, it's about sales. And so we're moving they're guiding us, right? There's a couple examples I'll share in another program of how they guide and what they're doing. But we're having a conversation with them as we go there, come back, maybe chat, different things like that. That process is what quickens that cycle and puts you in a position to have what we call the hook play. Right? We spend so much time thinking about the sell side that very rarely do we stop and think about the buy side. We have our funnel. Well, they have theirs. I'm aware of a lot of things that I'm not going to do anything with. There's a smaller number of things that I'm aware with that I've got some level of engagement, and a smaller number even still of where I'm curious, and then a smaller number still of where I'm investigating. And that's where my intent begins to emerge. Right? This is the value right here. This is the key fulcrum. This is the crossover period. We need to generate curiosity so that we can get engagement. And we can do it one of two ways. We can totally wait for them to do it and hope we're there, or make sure we got our SDRs making, their 18 by 5 plays every week to be there when I'm ready to do something. Hopefully, I haven't been pissed off yet. Or we can stimulate it, and we stimulate it with the hook play. So what's the hook play? What's it designed for? Again, the hook play is all about addressing the why should we talk. We want to move from engagement to curiosity, create ownership of the problem. We want our leads, our prospects to realize, wait a second, I have a problem. This problem is maybe a little bit more important than I thought it was. You see, when we do that, we reduce the hold of status quo. See, what we want to do is we want to just get some movement. I don't care how big the movement is. A conversation. Something, filling out a form. What's the next action? What's the next action? Because movement gets movement. Now, it's all geared to teaching the problem to increase the pain of not changing. See, we want to increase the pain of not changing before we say you have to change to benefit from it. We want to make the pain of not changing big enough that the idea of not changing is no longer a consideration. Right? That's where the sales cycle really speeds up. And what it does is it creates the path of least resistance. So that's the purpose of the play. The components of the play are, it's got to be low risk, preferably no risk. This is why freemium offers beat the you-know-what out of 14 or 30-day trials. See, I'm afraid of a 14 or 30-day trial, because if I get into a 14 or 30-day trial and something happens and all of a sudden I can't spend the time that I thought I was going to spend, I don't want to waste my 14 days yet. Freemium, I go, hey, yeah, I'll go in there, and if I don't get a chance, right, but I begin to play with it, right? So low risk or no risk. By the way, this works for non-SaaS companies. I'm going to show you some examples. It's got to be low effort. I can't ask you to do anything. Now, over time, as we implement series of hook plays, the effort can increase as the engagement increases, but it's got to start off being very low effort, and it's got to be low pressure. And what that means is, if I'm the buyer, if I'm on the buy side, I have to know that I can get out. One of the reasons that no one wants to engage with your content or engage with your free offers is because they don't see any exit strategy. The moment they decide they're not interested, they're afraid they're going to get hounded. So they just as soon not play. Low risk, low effort, low pressure, but it's also got to be high impact and high value. It's got to mean something. And that's why white papers don't work. Now, they work to get that initial engagement, but they don't move you through because, well, it's actually not low effort, but it's not high impact, right? It's educational, it's useful, but it's not high impact, right? The hook play has to be customer focused, so it's got to be about them, not about you. It teaches the problem, and it's aligned with the buyer journey progression. Let's take a look at a couple of examples. Right, here are some examples that we run. So we've got a tool we call the Demand Generation Website Report Card. We look at your website, we've developed an index, and this is based on qualitative metrics. So we look at how things are structured, the messaging on the site, we look at blogs, we test some things out, and we give you a report card. You don't have to do a single thing. We use this sometimes to just initiate the conversation. We'll send you the report card. Low risk, low effort, low pressure, high impact, because there's some good stuff in that report card. This isn't new. SEO, people have been doing it for years. The SEO report card, we can run a full site audit. You don't even have to know we did it. I sent it to you. It's high value. There's really good stuff in there. Appraisals, assessments, things like that. That's an example of a hook play that requires a little bit more effort. We're a little bit further in. Now, those things don't typically work right off the bat because there's too much effort involved. Let me play first. Here are some other examples. We have a client that works on the sales side in another industry. They've got their sales platform assessment, but two great ones. HubSpot for years has been using the website grader. And Drift just came out yesterday with their getmyresponsetime.com. Two excellent hook offers that get people engaged, get people to play with it. They begin to learn something. They understand their problem. It's movement beyond just downloading something. It's now actual give and take. Low risk, low effort, low pressure, high impact, high value. You see, when you do this, now you're able to take that bulging funnel and get more engagement, move them along the line. So what happens is you move that bulge down, if you will. Right now, you're not going to eliminate it right off the bat because timing is an important piece of this. Buyers buy on their time. All right. But now we've got engagement. Now we let the aspect of timing and alignment happen, and all of a sudden we have drastically widened our funnel. We have drastically increased our production capacity. We have increased our capacity. We've lowered our time on op, and we've created the environment for explosive growth without explosive costs. You see, what we do is we take this whole idea of making discovery a key part of our pipeline. Right? We bring it out there, and by implementing hook plays, what we do is we get investigation earlier. We get people engaging and back and forth. Hey, let me understand this. What's it mean earlier? Now, this there's still a time element, right? Just because they want to understand their problem doesn't mean they're ready to do something about it. That varies along degree. So you're still going to have a little bit of a chasm potentially from that diagnosis stage into the full sales process. But what you'll see is you'll drastically shorten the actual sales cycle, because this is where everyone gets killed in the sales cycle, because they didn't build the right footing. And oh, by the way, the other problem is, because of how our process is built, I don't talk to you until I'm ready to talk to you. So you have to hope that I define my problem the right way. In this environment, even though they're not full scale in a sales process necessarily, we have delivered fully an educational point of view, our teaching point of view. We know what their situation is. They know more about us. We've had a great degree of influence, which allows us to maintain that relevancy and win far more business. And that's how you double your pipeline. That's how you make high velocity growth effortless. That's a core part of what we call the customer acquisition platform, that lead management, lead conversion, and sales process. Lead generation is great, but if you're not turning that into bona fide pipeline opportunities and managing that opportunity effectively, it's not going to translate into faster growth, lower cost of growth, et cetera. And that all has to work together with strong strategy, strong playbooks, data and metrics. That's what the customer acquisition platform is about. That's how companies are growing effortlessly. And if you're curious about how to apply this strategy to what you're doing, or you just want to figure out how to improve your customer acquisition profile, for those of you that attend this program or watch this video, we are offering a free customer acquisition platform review. You can visit the website to register for that. You can send me an email. You can visit the blog to learn more about that. By the way, did you see what I did there, guys? See that nice little hook offer, right? Low effort, low risk, low pressure. I promise you we're not going to sell you anything. That's how hooks work. That's how we drive conversations. That's how we drive more bona fide opportunities. That's how we increase the perceived value of what we do. That's how we get out of discounting. And that's how we drive predictable, sustainable, and scalable results. Guys, thank you so much for joining today. I am going to pause here now and ask if anybody has the second question, since nobody likes to ask the first. I know I went through a rapid fire approach here, so we will be sending everybody a copy of the recording so you can listen to it again if you'd like. But if anyone has any questions, feel free to raise your hand, submit a question in the Q&A panel or chat or any of those things. Oh, we do have somebody who asked the question, don't most companies already do discovery? They do. I mean, discovery happens, but discovery doesn't happen by design, and people aren't measuring discovery. And what's happening in discovery is it's more driven as a means to suck people into the pipeline. They haven't really built that discovery phase where they maintain engagement and relevance. Even when there's not a sales cycle at play, they haven't built their process for that. Frankly, if they were doing discovery the way discovery should be done, their funnels wouldn't look like this, right? We wouldn't be talking about content not translating into bona fide sales, right? If we were doing discovery correctly, at worst, our funnel would look like this. We'd have this really strong middle of funnel, really strong conversations, and the complaints would be, we're losing too much time. We're losing too much money on the time that we're spending here. We're not able to get to the official sales opportunity. That's not what companies are complaining about. That's not the challenge that's happening. That's not where all the numbers are going. And so I would say that technically, yes, they do discovery, but they haven't aligned discovery to drive greater throughput, which again is, if you study how manufacturing solved its problems, you'll see that as we're doing things to try to increase our stages and shorten our stages, we're getting far more activity, but our costs are rising faster than our revenues are rising. And that's why it's funny, as companies get bigger, they spend more and more along those lines. Alrighty, we've got another question. How about that? See, once somebody asked the first question. So Danielle, I'm going to go ahead and give this a try. We're going to see if our technology works. I'm going to open up your microphone to let you ask your question. So Danielle. welcome to the show. I always wanted to say that.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, great. So my question is to follow up on the question before me. What would you recommend? Like, what would we need to add to our discovery processes to make them more efficient and push people through that pipeline or through that process?
Well, what you got to do, thank you, Danny. I'm going to go ahead and shut off your mic again just to make sure we don't get any background noise. If you have a follow-up question, just raise your hand again. What you got to do, it comes back to, you have to make sure you have these things in place. If you haven't mapped the journey, then you're not going to be able to make discovery do this, and that's why people are going to lag. So what you have to do is identify that, what is the next step that moves people towards that consideration. So if you were to take a look at the hook plays that we have and the hook offers that we have, we probably have about 11 or 12 variations of the play right now, and we're always building more, designed for different personas, different types of companies, at different points along this journey. So, if you think about the initial, the initial idea is to get us out of, not thinking about it at all to they're paying attention to something that we're doing. And so we're, again, it could be this program here is an example of a hook offering, geared very significantly to clearly identified problems that key personas have, as a way to drive a little bit more engagement, as a way, so Ryan and I will be following up with the people that we're supposed to follow up with. And we now already have a basis to dig deeper into that conversation. And really what it comes down to is, your hook offers get you here to that deepening conversation. The combination of the hook offer with timing and awareness and need is what creates that commitment to investigate. So you also need to change some of the process from pushing to sell to being ready and willing to have and maintain that conversation here. And again, in some cases that's physical conversation. In other cases, it's about how you use different online assets to drive that. And then the last piece would be the metrics to make sure that you're not just getting visits, but that you're actually getting progression as well. So that's kind of the overview of what you have to do. Strong funnel management and protocols will help guide all those things that I talked about. If you want to get into a little bit more depth about that, send me an email. Be happy to explain it a little bit more deeply. It is highly situational. It's very much dependent upon what your playbook is, what your strategy is. It's not just do what Drift did and have a website for this, because, obviously that's, highly dependent upon what your offer is and what your overall strategy is. So 2 great questions. Anything else? Alrighty, well, we're here. Again, if we can be of any help, don't hesitate to reach out. I appreciate the time and attention that everybody gave, and we will be hosting another webinar next month. For the first time in a while, we actually know the title of next month's webinar before we finish this one. So next month, we're going to talk about how to cut the sales cycle time in half. So today we talked about how to double the pipeline. Now later we're going to talk about how to cut the sales cycle time. So those 2 things together will really put your customer acquisition platform and in a high performance category. Thanks for joining us, and hopefully spring warms up and gets sunny for us all, and our paths cross soon.